Hi folks, you're very welcome to this week's Genos Live, and this is one of the ones that has really seemed to grab your imaginations, a topic that has really got you guys hopping out there. We're delighted to have Dr. Amanda Blake with us here today to talk about her book, Your Body is Your Brain, and to talk about our research into somatic awareness and somatic self-awareness. So we're going to bring Amanda on in just a couple of minutes, as is, if you want to call it traditional. We'll just do a little bit of introduction first. Some of you will know that Amanda has very kindly consented to give a link to anybody who is on the call here today to a centering challenge that runs over 7 days, about 10 or 15 minutes for 7 days in a row, for going from stress to serenity. So a centering practice designed to help you basically center. So we'll talk about that as we get through the session, as we get towards the end of the session. For now, let me just ask you, because there is so much interest in the topic. One, as I always do, where are you dialing in from? And by the way, if you happen to have anything really remarkably great and positive that has happened to you this week that you want to share, why not pop it in the chat as well? But do us a favor too. You see the question on the screen. What does embodied self-awareness mean to you? Does it mean anything to you? Pop whatever it means to you into the text, and it'll just be interesting when we bring Amanda on in a couple of moments, just to look at whether you're coming from a place where you've read into this, or it's totally new to you and it just caught your attention, or whatever you're coming from, and that'll help to position Amanda's talk as we go into things, and the chat as we go into things. As I tell you every week, and just in case it's the first time that you're coming to us, Genos International are an emotional intelligence organization. We provide assessments and programs to help organizations to build emotionally intelligent and psychologically safe environments. Environments where people show up to one another in a way that gets the best from them, for them, and from them for the organization they're working for. We also certify people to do what we do with our tools and with our programs. And in fact, that's a very particularly significant topic right now, because we're coming into the ICF Coaching Week, International Coaching Week. And we always do a collaboration with ICF where we do a special offer on our certification program. I want to give you, before we go into the session, just a quick look at what is emotional intelligence certification. What do we do? And then tell you what we're doing for anybody who is either an ICF member, or we have a secondary offer for people who are not ICF members but are attendants of Genos Live. So let me just I'm going to give you a quick 70 seconds or thereabouts video just on what is it that we do in terms of certification. So here we go. And here we go again. So just to give you a little bit of a flavor, as I say, we always do a collaboration with the ICF in International Coaching Week, and we're offering ICF members a 50% discount on certification for the upcoming program in June for people who sign up for that program during coaching week. And of course, for subscribers of Genos Live, where it's not being sponsored by the ICF, we're offering a 30% discount on that as well. So if you're interested in that, just browse through to the Genos International page, or drop us a line on eu@genosinternational.eu, and we'll get that, and we'll get the details out to you. Aoife is popping a link into the chat right now that'll get you straight onto the page if that's something that appeals. Before we bring Amanda on, let me tell you that in 2 weeks' time, we're taking a break next week. In 2 weeks' time, we have Patrick McKeon. And many of you will know Patrick McKeon. He's an Irish breathing expert, a very, very well-known globally. And he's a man who specializes in helping us to harness the power of our breath in managing our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system to improve our resilience, our ability to de-stress, our focus, our performance, and works with sports people and business people all over the world. We are really delighted to have him coming into us in 2 weeks' time, because he's going to come in and talk about his new book, Atomic Focus, where he talks about the role of the breath in bringing your attention and your focus to whatever it is you need to bring your attention and focus to. So that will be in 2 weeks' time. And we're swapping to a new time of 12:30 BST because of the feedback we've had from you that is much more suitable. So for new speakers coming in, we're going to be running from 12:30 in future. So that's June 2nd with that. As you know, or you may not know, but if it's your first time here, Genos Live is generally a weekly show. It has a lineup of world-class experts, well known for their expertise in their fields, of which Amanda and Patrick are just two. If you haven't signed up to get the weekly reminders, Aoife's going to pop a link into the chat. You can sign up on there, and we just send out every week and tell you, here's who's coming in, here's what it's about, and if it's of interest, then you come along, and if it's not, well, then we'll be in contact with you the following week to let you know what's going on. So, having said that, let's bring Amanda and Aoife in. And first thing I want to do is welcome Amanda. Really, really delighted to have you here, and thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm so excited for our conversation today and to talk to all the folks out there listening in. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you, Amanda. And Aoife, tell me, what are we getting? First off, where are people dialing in from? And what are we getting on embodied self-awareness? Where are the audience coming from?
Sure. Great to be back with you both today. Amanda, really looking forward to your session. So thanks for being with us. We've had people waiting right before the session started, so they are eager to hear what you have to share. And from all over the world, from Bucharest, Romania, from Ireland, from the United Kingdom, from Malta, Copenhagen, more in Bucharest, Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, in Dubai, in Canada, Boston, Massachusetts, South Africa, and Sri Lanka so far. So all over the world, delighted to have you.
Aoife, and Amanda may be sitting there when I say what I'm going to say next, and she may be thinking, I bet you say that to all the girls. But honestly, I think, and am I right, Aoife, that is the most internationally diverse audience we've had so far. I don't think we've had a longer roll call of countries since we started Genos Live.
I think you might be right, Derek. And we have actually had one comment in on someone's what embodied self-awareness means to them. So shall I go through it?
Yeah, go for it.
So Denisa, actually, one of our Genos practitioners, has shared that embodied self-awareness to me is paying attention to how we are experiencing something, a challenge, a relationship, etc., not just on a mind and emotional level, but also as a whole body experience. Kind of exploring what my mind says, what my heart says, and what the rest of my body says about the challenge I am reflecting on.
Wow. Amanda?
Couldn't have said it better. This is beautiful. Good. Our work here is done.
And you know, I was telling Denisa, many thanks for that. And if anybody else has any feedback on it, I was telling, sorry, I have to call him, Amanda has in her notes for folks like ourselves, clarity that says you can call me Mandy when we're talking, but in, you know, the formal stuff, it's Amanda. So I'm going to go to Mandy. And I was talking to Mandy when we were checking out the tech last week, and I said in a session that I was doing on Leader as Coach, I mentioned that Mandy was coming up on it, and a few people really got quite, ooh, great. And Denisa, actually, Amanda was one of those folks. Mandy was one of those folks who said, oh, I'll be there. So good that you made it, Denisa. Thank you. You know, so Eva, do you want to do the formal piece and then just of introducing Mandy for those people who are coming to her work for the first time, and then we'll get into that conversation.
I would be delighted to. So yeah, as Derek shared, we already have a lot of big fans of Dr. Amanda Blake on the session today. But for those of you that haven't yet experienced her work, Dr. Blake is the author of the award-winning book Your Body is Your Brain, and the creator of the Body Equals Brain course on the neurobiology of experiential leadership learning. In addition to teaching about the art and science of embodiment, she works with progressive leaders worldwide to help them become their best self, enjoy life more, and make a bigger contribution. Important work. Once an internationally competitive athlete, Mandy is skilled at cultivating high performance in herself and in others. She is a Master Somatic Leadership Coach, holds a degree in human biology from Stanford University, and is both a Fetzer Scholar and Research Fellow at the Fowler Center for Business as an agent of world benefit. Longtime yoga enthusiast, mountaineer, musician, and celebrator of life. That's my favorite line in there as well, Mandy. And I believe just recently completed her doctorate as well. So a big congratulations. And Mandy, we are so excited to have you here with us today. I'm going to be monitoring the questions, so if you see me looking down at any point, I'm not paying attention. I am keeping track of all the feedback that we have coming in. So thank you for being with us.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. As I said, thank you, Eva and Derek. And either way, I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Just so, in fact, you know what I'm going to do, Eva? Let me tell you, folks. I dropped the ball on this. Normally, I'd have Mandy's book up on the screen, and instead of Mandy's book, I have the program that she's going to be. Oh, hang on a second. Here we go. Oh my God, I'm making a dog's dinner of this today. Okay, I'll tell you what, I don't have anything. So so what we'll do is we're just going to talk to Amanda. And in fact, I'll drop Eva off there. And do you know what you can do, Eva, is you can give me a wave down from the backstage when you have some questions coming in, so that we can stop there. So one of the things, Mandy, in the book that really, and I said it to you last week, that really struck me was the story around how you suddenly got this Archimedes moment, this wow moment when that said, I've got to write this book. And it was almost like the idea for it popped into your head, fully formed. Maybe not the work, but the idea for it. And you had that eureka moment. You ran up the stairs, you pulled out every book that you had, and that's what became Your Body is Your Brain. Can you just tell us a little bit about what was it that excited you to write this book, which wasn't really there before? There wasn't a book like it there before.
Yeah, there really was a book. And I think there were a couple different things that led to that. My own experience of learning about probably some of the stuff I'm going to talk about today, which is how to tap the body's intelligence for better performance in life and in the workplace and with your family and friends. I don't like to think about that performance. Better relationship, better connection. It's really been on a journey of developing those skills myself, while having a lifetime of background in science, in athletics, and particularly science of human biology and the intersection between biology and psychology. It was very interesting and worked for a long time in business education environments. And so it really was like a kind of a eureka moment of looking around my bookshelves, different floors and in different rooms. I grabbed like this book and da 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 da, and all these different topics, and I put them in the floor, and I sat there with these books, and I said, "There's nothing that out there that I've found really answers my questions about why is it so transformative." Why has it been so transformative for me? Why is it so transformative with those that I work with as a coach? Why would it be so revelatory and behavior changing to stand differently, or to drop your chin by half an inch, or to soften your eyes, or to become aware of your seat in the chair? Like, doesn't make sense to somewhere in topics that I've been interested in all of my life: spirituality, management, emotional intelligence, neuroscience, and the brain. Like, somewhere there's an answer. And that's what I set out to do, was to really answer a question for myself, and also to make this very, I think, revolutionary work much more widely accessible by making it more understandable.
Great, thank you. And by the way, just folks, where I'm aware that there's a little bit of stutter going on Amanda's signal there, and sometimes the web and streaming, sometimes that'll happen, and with God's help it'll pass. But we got what you were saying. There was just a little bit of fingers crossed, toes crossed, and we got what you were saying. One of the things that really spoke to me, Amanda, in the book as an emotional intelligence person, is you called the body, and I thought this was a really great expression, you called it your social and emotional sense organ. Can you go a little bit deeper on that idea?
Yeah, so we have sense organs: our eyes, our ears, our tongue, information, our sensory kind of perceptors give us information of the world. And we are highly, highly social creatures. That goes without saying, but we don't often think about that. It's like our bodies and our brains evolved to social connections, social relationships, social negotiations. And in fact, our sense organ for emotions and for our relationships is our entire body out to our fingers and toes. And in a certain way, we're like an antenna, both broadcasting and receiving signals about ourselves, others, and the rest of the world, all the time body is.
Yeah, and what's interesting, and again, I had heard the notion before, but you go into it in quite some depth, because this is not a woo-woo book. This is not some kind of new age hippy dip. There's a lot of science in this book. And I loved, again, that analogy that you used of the body kind of like an antenna. And one of the things that I had heard but didn't quite appreciate before I read the book was just the extent to which there are connections between the gut, the heart, the brain, and that all of that wiring exists there. Is it possible to give a kind of a short version of that for folks, for how let's call them the mechanics work, the connection between the enteric system and the nervous system and so on?
Yeah, so you mentioned the enteric system. Sometimes that's thought of as the second brain, and there's actually a book by that name by a doctor who does work on that system. It's a nervous system that is in our gut, the enteric nervous system. Some scientists think of that as a third branch of the autonomic nervous system, which is the part of our nervous system that controls things like digestion, heartbeat, response to safety and danger. And that part of our nervous system in our gut is the second largest collection of nerve cells outside of the brain in our head. It's the only part of the nervous system that can actually turn down or decline instructions from the brain in the head. It can operate pretty independently.
Wow.
And there are, through the vagus nerve, which some listeners may have heard of, it's an important nerve that runs sort of straight down through the middle of you, not through your spine. It's not a spinal nerve, but it's known as a cranial nerve. It goes straight into the brain. and it innervates both the gut and the heart, as well as the lungs. And that nerve, the vagus nerve, has 9 times as many nerve cells sending information to the brain as from the brain into those organs. And so what we see is actually there's a lot of, just sort of anatomically, there's a lot of information coming, particularly from the torso up into the brain. There are other ways that out to our fingers and toes information is communicated up to the brain. But you really have to think of it as a bidirectional system that's heavily, heavily influenced by the sensations and experiences inside the body, most of which are biological design and cultural convention, pretty much outside of our conscious awareness on a day-to-day basis. So for us to get familiar with all that information that's going on and that actually tells us a lot about our lives, it's our social and emotional sense organ. For us to get familiar, we have to pay attention, and we have to learn to pay attention in sometimes new and different ways than we might be accustomed to.
And that's what's lovely about that idea of a second brain, is that it makes sense of language that we've used for so many years when we talk about, I feel it in my gut, and I sense it in my gut, and oh, she moved my heart, and so on. It really just lends the truth to that whole thing. It gives you that anatomical basis for what we already kind of instinctively know about ourselves, right?
Well, there's poetic truth, and the poets of the world can actually experience and express deep truths, and there's scientific truth, and in this case they correspond, right? And we will find throughout our language, so not just I have butterflies in my stomach, right, but also many other expressions like, oh, that person's really cold-blooded, or what a sharp tongue, right, or that person's spineless. So throughout our language we have these expressions of the self, maybe behavior, maybe qualities that we might seem to embody. Spineless is a great example of that, right? We mean something about the person's character. We don't actually mean that they don't have any vertebrae in their body, right? So we will use these embodied metaphors, and linguists have looked at this across languages and said, yes, actually, we understand, like all of our abstractions in the world, we understand that through physical embodied metaphors. And it's so embedded in the way we think that we just don't see it. It's the water we swim in. It's the fish going, what water, right?
And yet, you made reference to it there a moment ago. You said that we need to learn to listen, and by implication you're saying we don't listen to that kind of second brain the way we could, which kind of nicely segues into something that a lot of our audience will be familiar with, because a lot of our audience are either coaches, consultants, trainers who are dealing with developing people, or people who are interested in coaching, developing people. And so the whole idea of self-awareness won't be entirely new to them, but you're bringing that new dimension of embodied self-awareness into it. How do they coexist, or how do they live together?
Yeah, well, there's the researchers tell us there's at least two different kinds of self-awareness, and they're anatomically different as well as experientially different. So the kind of self-awareness that we're pretty accustomed to paying attention to is known as conceptual self-awareness. And that's an informational self-awareness where we might think through our values, for example, or identify something that happened in the past and what we have to learn from that, or maybe how that shaped us and how we want to change going into the future. So we can envision the future and know what we want. We can learn from the past. And the anatomy of conceptual self-awareness is mostly centered in the linguistic centers of the brain and the face, neck, and head. So everything we use for verbal communication.
Okay.
Embodied self-awareness is different. It's not informational knowing, it's experiential knowing. And that experiential knowing is, when you stub your toe, that's not a piece of information, that's an experience that you have. And of course, we stub our toes in relationships and around the workplace all day long, unfortunately. And so we want to be able to tap into the kind of self-awareness that allows us to recognize when we've stubbed our toe, or maybe when we've accidentally kicked someone under the table, and to be able to recover from that, not just as an idea, but we have physiological reactions. When I say, your body's your social and emotional sense organ, this antenna is having reactions to the experience of our life all day long. And the anatomy of that goes, like I said earlier, all the way out to our fingers and toes. And we've talked about some of that anatomy already with the heart and the gut and the vagus nerve and so on. So one of the things to be aware of is we have a cultural propensity to really look pretty closely at our conceptual self-awareness.
Right.
And we have a strong cultural propensity to discount, dismiss, and deliberately look away from our embodied self-awareness, to mistrust it, to look away. And then in addition to that, we have kind of this anatomical, physiological obstacle, which is that the nerve cells that tell us about our interior experience are, while they still operate on nanosecond timelines, they're a little bit smaller, they're a little bit slower communicators than the nerve cells that tell us about the world happening outside our own skin. And that's because we have the biological capability to put all that internal stuff on autopilot. We can't really put anything outside our own skin on autopilot, so we need to be ready to respond. So we've evolved heavily weighted towards sensory organs like sight and sound and smell and taste. But really all of those signals coming from inside the body carry really, really important information for us. We just don't necessarily, we haven't necessarily learned how to pay attention to that information in Western culture in particular.
And what I find really interesting, you were talking about, how a lot of that processing is done in the same areas as we process sight and sound, and so it's and so we tend to ignore those kind of more subtle feeling things. And yet, am I right? And I'm going on a slight tangent, but I seem to remember reading a piece of research that said that unconsciously, if there's incongruence between a message coming out somebody's mouth who's communicating with us and the way we feel about that message, that we instinctively actually select unconsciously to believe what we feel rather than what we hear or see, the rational. So there's this whole contradiction thing going on, it seems.
Yeah, so the poet's phrasing of this, and I won't remember, maybe you'll remember who we should credit with this famous line. People won't remember what you say, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And it's true. What is most evocative to us, and what in fact the bulk of our brain real estate is tuned to responding to, is actually that felt sense that we pick up from others. And some research has shown that in conversations with a close other, where there's something strongly emotional at stake, that upwards of 90% of communication can be keyed to body language and vocal tone, and maybe only like 7 to 10% the actual words we use. It's not that the words aren't important.
Sure,
they're critical, but we're really tuned biologically to as an antenna to pick up and pay attention to kind of the subtle signals that we're getting. And we don't even do that very often with conscious awareness. It's just happening and shaping our perspective.
Yeah, by the way, Maya Angelou who said people will never forget the way you made them feel. And the only reason I remember that, honestly, Mandy, is because I think I probably quote it every second day, because I think it's just words to live by. People will never forget that. Isn't it interesting? I almost have this cartoon in my mind when you're talking there of this Johnny come lately thinking brain that comes in and kind of pushes aside the millions of years of development of the more emotional aspect of our being, saying you've nothing to offer. And yet in the background we are programmed very much more directly by the way we feel and the way we feel about folks, and that the impact it has on us is just so dramatic.
I think yes and no to that. So I think we do have we do have this understanding of kind of evolutionary development of the brain, and it's not wrong, but it's not the complete picture.
Okay.
So there's really kind of two different kinds of reasoning that are on equal footing with one another and that kind of toggle between one another. And these two different kinds of reasoning are equally critical to our success and survival. And one of them is an analytical kind of reasoning, and the other is what's sometimes termed empathic reasoning. And these are very clearly distinct, functionally correlated, and yet distinct and mutually suppressive networks in the brain. Some folks who are kind of into the brain science might know them as the task positive network and the default mode network. And both of these are different types of thinking and reasoning. So it's not so much that like the thinking self is the Johnny come lately. It's more that we have super overemphasized a fascination with our analytical reasoning and have really underemphasized our capacity for what you might term empathic or embodied reasoning, which is heavily reliant on physical sensations from the body, heavily reliant on emotions, and very, very closely tied to all of that. So, well, it's not wrong to say that there's kind of an evolutionarily older part of the brain that's, you know, we might call it safety-oriented lizard brain or emotionally oriented limbic brain. That's not really wrong, but it's an incomplete and early model that's being refined, let's say, significantly refined with the newer research coming out.
Okay. Now let me I'm just looking down to Aoife in the back room and just wondering, and do you want to come on now with questions, or will I keep going? Okay. So earlier on, you said, Amanda, we have to learn to tap into that. So coming away from the theory for a moment, what does that look like in a practical sense? Tapping into that and acknowledging and making use of all that phenomenal data that's flowing in and out of us all the time.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I want to do is suggest to. I'll make a really pragmatic suggestion to listeners, and then maybe we can play around with some practice, you and I, that folks can play along with.
Okay.
So one of the really, really practical things you can do is on your phone or on a piece of paper on your desk, if you still like the analog way of operating in the world, to just keep a running list of sensation words. So these are words like, if you're going to talk about temperature, for example, what words would you use besides hot or cold? And if you even look inside your body right now, when I say look, I don't mean look with your eyes, but look with your sensory apparatus, right? Your internal senses. What are you experiencing around temperature? Can you describe it in more refined language than hot and cold? Maybe you're sweating, maybe you're chilled, maybe you're lukewarm, maybe there's a whole range. And temperature is just one of the kind of nerve cells that talk to us about our lived experience. So you might also look for experiences of movement or of density and lightness, right? So like a sense of your heart beating, or a sense of something rushing upwards or settling downwards. So try and make your own list of sensation words that will expand your vocabulary. And as you expand your vocabulary, you'll actually be able to see and sense more in your own body.
Yeah. Sorry, no, go ahead. Keep going.
No, did you have something else?
Oh, I was just musing on the fact that I see exactly where you're going, that if you can expand that vocabulary, well, and you have a wider range of vocabulary to be able to describe those different states, well, then you're obviously almost by osmosis going to be able to experience that wider range of changes in the body. I mean, I think most people that we meet, and most people that I meet, and probably myself, when somebody says, "How are you?" It ranges from crap to good, or from okay. Well, maybe not even necessarily good. Very, very frequently, at least, and I don't mean any disrespect to my countrymen, but I think it's fair to say in Ireland, how are you? If you ask somebody how are they doing, they'll say the American equivalent of okay. They'll say grand, which is not absolutely fantastic. It's just it's grand. It's okay. Or how are you? Oh well, I'm S word, T word, and very little in between. So I see where you're going with that. So you mean literally physically keep a list of when you check in, what's going on temperature wise, what am I feeling emotionally, etc., and so that you expand that vocabulary.
Yeah, and this is a bit parallel to perhaps what some of you do in your work, helping people expand their emotional vocabulary and helping people develop emotional intelligence. And one of the things that just a quick departure for something else theoretical here, in my research, what we've seen is a relationship between embodied self-awareness. So developing, a list is sort of the most basic way to start. So we'll go deeper than that. But embodied self-awareness develops emotional self-awareness. And when you develop emotional self-awareness, you actually, all those qualities that go along with emotional intelligence and social intelligence start to increase. So it's a really pivotal lever. Developing embodied self-awareness, a really pivotal lever we've seen for developing emotional and social intelligence, which is very cool. It's associated with greater resilience, with greater capacity for conflict management as you develop your embodied self-awareness. So maybe it makes sense to just do some little exercise right now that people can kind of get into their bodies. Is that
that sounds like a great idea. Absolutely, let's do it. Bring it on.
Okay. Derek, can you still see me, because my screen froze a little bit a while back? I know you said there were hiccups.
Oh, okay. No, you're coming across perfectly, and in fact, the little hiccups have stopped.
Great. Okay. Good. Then, as long as you can see me, viewers can see me. What I want to suggest you do is just pick one side of your body. I'm going to pick my left side.
Okay.
And I'm just gonna do like one arm. I'm kind of gonna swipe down that arm. And if you could do that as well, Derek, just as an experiment, we'll see how this goes for you. I'm also just I'm gonna put my hand in a little bit of a claw like this and tap along the back of my arm.
Let's bring Aoife in on this. No.
Yeah.
There we go.
Wiggle my fingers a little bit on that left side, and maybe just stretch my arm, wiggle my arm. And then just a deep exhale. And just in that arm, Derek, what do you notice first, maybe in a word or two words? What do you notice in the arm that you didn't stretch and tap and swipe? Just give me a word for what that experience is.
Dumb, quiet. In the one that I didn't, yeah.
Yeah, and the one that you didn't. Aoife, do you have anything to add there?
Same thing, almost. Now that I'm aware of it, thinking it almost feels heavy compared to the one that I did move.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the one that you did move, just I'd love to hear from both of you, like one word to describe that.
Light, I would say. Light.
A warmth or tingling from
Tingling, I got that as well.
With the nails.
Yeah. Yeah. So, one of the reasons to do this is simply to kind of wake up the sensory nerves that are in not only your muscles, but actually the connective tissue that surrounds every muscle. And one of the interesting things anatomically that we now know about the body's intelligence, we used to think that the most densely innervated part of the body was the retina at the back of the eye, so that the most information that we get from the world is through our visual sense. It turns out actually that the most densely innervated organ in the body is the fascia, or the connective tissue that surrounds every muscle, every organ. It's what allows your organs to slide by each other. And what we're doing when we're doing this little bit of waking up, and if you want to, you can do the other side now so that you're not all...
So you're balanced out.
Right?
Yeah.
So you can do that, and anyone listening or watching along can do that. Give that arm a little shake. What you're doing is you're getting the attention of all of those sensory nerves in your fascia that are communicating up to your brain. And what it does is it just kind of like awakens and enlivens your body. And the kinds of words that I frequently hear, and you were pointing to this, like lighter, more tingly, that's really common. Aliveness, awake, more relaxed, more ready. All right. So this is one of the things I said before, that we have like both a biological and cultural propensity to not pay attention to what's happening in our body. And that's one of the reasons. There are several reasons why we generally, when we want to pay attention inside, we close our eyes, we go somewhere quiet, maybe we play soft music, right? We try and reduce those external distractions so that we can pay attention quietly on the inside. One of the things you can do is just wake yourself up a little bit. You'll feel more, sense more. And that'll help you pay attention for a little while. And then you can expect that will fall out of your awareness. And then you may want to do that again. Tap your legs, or especially tap your torso, your belly, your low back. Now, those are very simple things. And if you want, I can tell maybe a story or two about sort of what that looks like on a more sophisticated level when you're working with a client, when like a coach is working with a client one-on-one. What do you do then?
That would be fantastic. Yeah,
that would be really great. Just one comment. When I woke up, as you say, the right arm, there was this strange sensation of the fingertips. It almost felt like I was a Marvel character with some power in my fingertip. It literally, it was all, the sensation was right up there. You know, I can't remember, the torch or whatever, ready to kind of zoom something out, because there's that sense of energy at the top. But it would be great. And I'll tell you what would be really great is to hear, one, how that works when you're working with somebody one-on-one, but also how that works in your program. And how you work with people in the program, because I would say, and guys, throw it into the chat there, and Aphil will share it up. I would say there's a great curiosity building there as to, okay, what can I do next? And so tell us more about that.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Your your Marvel comment makes me want to share the deep secret that nobody ever gets to hear about this, which is when you get really, really, really good at it, you can levitate.
I'm ready. I tried TM years ago and I never got it.
So let's kind of a more sophisticated level. I mean, all we've done here is like, here's some things that you can do to pay more attention to sensation. Make yourself a list. Wake up your body in really simple ways. You don't have to go to an hour-long dance class or yoga class or Tai Chi class. If you do that, keep doing that. It's wonderful. it'll support all of this. But in fact, what the research shows is that an integration between your conceptual self-awareness and your embodied self-awareness is the most powerfully transformative way to develop your embodied self-awareness, and then alongside that, all these other benefits. Flourishing in life is one of the things that we show is associated with embodied growth and embodied self-awareness. And like I said before, resilience, adaptability, conflict management. So what this can look like is, in practice, working with a client one-on-one. I once was working with a woman who she actually came to me because she really wanted to set more clear boundaries at work and be able to really like shut things down and go home at 5 o'clock.
Right.
And she was having a very difficult time doing that. And while in the period of time that we worked together, there was someone in her personal life, someone really important to her, who also started challenging her boundaries. And the way that we ultimately worked together was to find how her body responded when she felt compelled to say yes or to do more.
Okay.
And the response in her body was, many of us will be familiar with this kind of experience. The response in her body was a speeding up of her heart. So as she started to pay more attention to those subtle sensations on the inside, she was like, oh, I can feel my heart speeding up. I lean in and everything gets tense, right?
Okay.
Like I get this tension and this fast movement and a leaning in. And so what we worked on to help her develop, what we can count on is like those kinds of responses, they're partly biological, they're partly automatic, they're partly learned over a long period of time. We're generally not going to get rid of them, and they're also there for a protective reason. So the question is, how do you help your client actually build a different way to protect themselves in those situations? And what she and I worked on was having her stand up straight and open her chest, right? Okay. So that she was not leaning in and tense, but that she could relax her shoulders, stand up straight. While it's not easy to directly intervene in a fast beating heart, we worked on her feeling that without being immediately reactive to it and wanting to make it go away, right? And then the third thing that we added was to have her use a rolling chair and physically push the chair away from herself to make space and say no out loud. And we came up with other phrases that she needed to say to this specific person in her life as well. Of shift, posture, gesture, internal sensation, the movements that you make. Now, you're not going to get to the end of the work day and, push a rolling chair away from you, or you're not going to be in conversation with someone and push them. That's not the idea. Yeah. But sometimes you need to actually push back from your desk or physically make space in front of yourself as a counteracting, to that leaning. So all of that starts with the capacity to actually sense inside yourself. Help your client sense inside themselves and discover what may be going on for them physically in response to their life. And then, and then design embodied practices that they can do repeatedly. She did this many times throughout the day to kind of develop the muscle memory of, oh, this is what it's like. This is what it feels like to have boundaries. And actually that feels really good, solid, clear to me. So that's one example. That's
a really interesting. Sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just going to finish by saying you can do that with any kind of quality. So a desire to be of service, a desire to have more visibility at work, a desire to develop confidence, a desire to be more consistent and clear in your decision making. All of these can lend themselves to this kind of an embodied approach. What's the lived experience of being more confident, more decisive, more compassionate, whatever it is you're trying to develop in yourself. And that's a lot of, you asked me to talk about the Body Equals Brain program. That's a lot of what we do in that program is to help people learn the process that I just described of like, here's how you would do that for yourself. Here's how you would do that for clients.
Okay, and Aoife, I think posted earlier on the link to your site, so that anybody who's interested can go and find out a bit more about that. I just as you were listening, I was thinking you're obviously talking directly to me, but it felt like you were talking directly to me because, like I'm sure a number of people on this call, I've spent most of my life as what they call a people pleaser. And I'm very aware of it. And I'm even aware of when I'm people pleasing and I don't want to be people pleasing. And I really hear that message that, you know, when I find myself saying, why am I doing this? That I need to physically embody some alternative approach to the way, if you like, physically I'm showing up.
Yeah, it's an overlooked avenue for change. So as a fellow people pleaser, I can relate. And it's really, which also brings to mind perfectionism, right? Which also goes along with it very often, right? And so it can be very hard for us to shift out of those behavioral habits by learning all the reasons why you developed a people-pleasing habit in the first place, or learning all the payoffs and benefits of people-pleasing and what the costs are, right? That's all conceptual self-awareness. It's incredibly valuable.
Of course.
But what's more powerful is to go, okay, here we're using only sort of half or maybe even less than half of our capacity for awareness of ourselves. Let's also get in on the experience of people. When you are in that people-pleasing mode, and especially since you can recognize when you're doing it and wish you weren't doing it, but you're doing it anyway, right? All of that. The thing to start to pay attention to is like, well, what's the set of your shoulders? Is your, you know, are your eyes super focused or more? Are you leaning in or are you leaning back? Do you feel more warm or cool? And these are all the kinds of questions to ask to go, what is the experience in the moment of people pleasing? And then what's another experience that you've had in your life that might counteract and interrupt that? And how do you build that muscle? Kind of like going to the gyms and doing sit-ups, which I'm sure sounds like a nightmare to some listeners. But
I live with my people pleasing.
This is not an idea-based way of learning. So you can't go to the gym one time, do sit-ups for half an hour and walk out and go, now I have abs, right? You have to go, here's what I'm going to do to interrupt and counteract people pleasing. And I'm going to do that over and over and over in unimportant, low-stakes environments as a regular daily practice, so that all of a sudden when I get in that moment where my old habit wants to kick in, I have another muscle memory. I'm like, oh, I remember what that feels like to make that boundary for myself, which is very different from I know all the reasons why people-pleasing is actually costing me.
Well, look,
I get worked up about this because it's so transformative.
I can feel as you speak it, it's so intuitive that would be helpful, and so intuitive. You know, when you say it, there's no resistance. There's no even intellectual resistance. That couldn't possibly work. You just intuitively know that it potentially could. We are, let me see, 6 minutes and 6 seconds away from the end, and I was really afraid that what happened today was going to happen. When we spoke last week, we had a 15-minute, if you recall, tech check that turned into 50-minute chat, and it went by in a heartbeat. And I was afraid it was going to happen here. I think it's one of these topics that just run and run and run. We're going to connect people, obviously, to your site, where we've sent them a link to the book. We suggest very strongly they look at the course. And then, of course, you've given the gift of access to the 7-day centering challenge. Can you give me about 2 minutes and tell me what can people expect to take away if they go and sign up and complete that 7-day challenge?
Yeah, so the challenge is really, it's 7 sessions over 14 days so that you really get some practice in, and also because people can't stay on top of their email every day. And so what you'll receive is a guidebook that explains some of what this challenge is, some of the neurobiology behind this process of centering that I teach. And then it's a process that builds on itself. So you'll get an audio recording every other day, I think it is. And the audio is just me walking you through a really simple process of paying attention to your sensations and coming back aligned to what we might call a physical sensory movement. So up, down, side to side, front to back. How do you physically get aligned with that? And then how do you simultaneously bring in or get aligned with what you care about? Because this is not just, as I've said from the outset, this is not just about the body. It's about integrating the body with your thinking self, with your conceptual, intellectual, and analytical understanding. So it's conceptual self-awareness plus embodied self-awareness. And that centering challenge, while it emphasizes how to pay attention to how you sit, stand, and move throughout the day, it also incorporates meaning, care, love, and how do you embody the things that matter most to you.
Right, and I am on step 4 right at the moment, and I am paraphrasing you, say take it out into the world or take it on the road. I can't remember what the expression was, and I think that's the point where it really starts to resonate and you really start to get it. So I strongly recommend to everybody. I'm going to put a link up on the screen, and Aoife will have posted a link into the chat for you. Mandy, I wish we had more time. I really do. I hope you can hang around for even 2-3 minutes so we can formally thank you behind the scenes as well. But thank you. Really appreciate the time, and please God, we'll get you back again at some stage in the future on the next book, perhaps. Now that you have all of that free time with the PhD behind you, the second book, I know, I'm not asking, but I know it has to be on the way. It's up there. It's up there somewhere. Thank you very, very much indeed.
About it.
Yeah.
And yeah, the next book is coming, so for those who are interested, keep an eye out. It's a lot more about practice and how to put this into action. So thank you so much for having me, both of you. This has been an absolute pleasure. I love talking about this stuff, so I'm sure you can come back.
Absolutely our pleasure. Thank you so much.
Mandy.
Okay, so let me just get back to where we were. Where were we? Where is my remote control gone? Here we go. So Aoife will already have put the link in. If you like the QR code, you can scan over that, and we'll pop it up into LinkedIn, into the chat in LinkedIn, and into the chat in YouTube and Facebook and so on and so forth. But highly recommend you download it. As I say, I'm working through it myself at the moment, and it's a great reminder daily just to get more in touch with oneself. As I said to you before, we have Patrick McKeon coming up, and in fact we never quite got to it, but myself and Mandy had spoken about something that she talks about in the book, and that's the connection of the breath into all this. And breath plays a very, very big part in Mandy's work, and obviously it is completely Patrick McKeon's work. So really excited to get Patrick in. It's not next week. As I say, we're taking a break next week. I'm actually at a conference in Bucharest, and I'm over there going to be going around tapping people on the shoulder to get our second half of the year's guests into it, because there's some fantastic guests coming up at the Great People Inside conference. So we will see you in 2 weeks' time, please God. Meantime, wish you all the best. If there's anything we can do to be of any help to you whatsoever, please let us know. And obviously, if you're interested in hopping onto the opportunity with the certification program during International Coaching Week, let us know. But until we see you, sorry, I flicked away from that for a moment. Until we see you at Patrick's session in a couple of weeks' time, wishing you all the best. Take care, folks.